Welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with talks between the world's two largest economies. The United States and China held their second round of talks in London, aimed at tackling the ongoing trade tensions. The two sides focused on export controls, especially shipments of technology and rare earth elements. President Lee is seeking measures to tamp down inflation, acknowledging that higher food prices are taking a toll on South Koreans. He's now ordered officials to draft an additional supplementary budget to curb inflation and boost consumption. Protests are intensifying in Los Angeles, where thousands of demonstrators took to the streets over recent raids on immigrants. Hundreds of Marines were mobilized to support National Guard troops as protests continue. The United States and China held a second round of their trade talks in London. The two countries discussed export controls, which have emerged as a key issue in their ongoing trade war. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
The United States and China held the second round of trade negotiations in London on Monday and discussed key issues to resolve the ongoing trade war between the two economic powerhouses. According to Bloomberg, the two sides concluded their first day of negotiations after holding talks for more than 6 hours. The first day of talks was centered on discussing export controls, specifically over shipments of technology and rare earth elements. The U.S. delegation was led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, while the Chinese delegation was led by Vice Premier He Lifeng. During the talks, the U.S. indicated willingness to partially lift technology export controls targeting China in exchange for the easing of restrictions on rare earth exports to the U.S. However, when asked about the talks between Washington and Beijing, U.S. President Donald Trump said while the U.S. is doing well in talks, China is not easy.
We are doing well with China. China's not easy, just like your home country is not easy there. I think we're doing very well. They're over there now. I'm only getting good reports. It's a little early, but they'll be calling in soon. In fact, probably when I get back, I'll have my first call from them. We want to open up China, and if we don't open up China, maybe we won't do anything. But
the latest trade negotiations also stem from the differences in positions between the two countries over whether the two major economies violated the trade agreement reached in Geneva last month. At the time, the two sides agreed to drastically lower tariffs on each other's goods for an initial 90-day period. However, Washington claimed that Beijing violated the agreement. The U.S. says China has been reluctant to release exports of rare earth metals and magnets, while China says Washington restricted its access to U.S. goods such as semiconductors and AI technologies. With still much to be discussed between the two countries, officials plan to meet again at 10 a.m. on Tuesday for a second day of talks in London. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's new president, Lee Jae-myung, kicked off his first full week in office by addressing inflation and stressing the urgent need for an extra budget to revive the local economy. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min has this report.
Noting higher prices cause too much pain to the people. This is how President Lee Jae-myung began the second Emergency Economic Task Force meeting.
최근에 물가가 엄청나게 올랐다고 그러더라고요. 라면 한 개 2,000원 한다는데 진짜예요?
The president urged his team to seek out measures to tamp down inflation before they meet again next time. Present at Monday's meeting in Yongsan were newly appointed aides, including Chief of Policy Kim Yong-bum and Senior Secretary for Economic Growth Ha Jun-kyung, as well as relevant government officials.
그 생각 좀 해주시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 우리가 쓰는 1시간은 5,200만 시간의 가치가 있다. 그만큼 영향이 큰 거죠.
The agenda behind closed doors outlined an additional supplementary budget, signaling a shift towards an expansionary fiscal approach at a time when the country is facing a low growth rate for this year expected to hover around 1%, as well as sluggish demand at home.
The president ordered an extra budget to be organized in a speedy manner to revive the economy and boost consumption. Secondly, he urged for priority to be given to the vulnerable and small business owners for support.
The National Assembly passed a 13.8 trillion won extra budget bill in May, worth some $10 billion, and the second batch is expected to be at least 20 trillion won. Details, including the size of the extra budget, have not been disclosed. The newly inaugurated South Korean leader ordered the launch of the Emergency Economic Task Force as his first executive order as soon as he took office last week. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
So the new administration is speeding up efforts to revitalize the economy by laying out plans to curb inflation and boost consumption. For more on this, we have Park Min-jung, Professor of Business Administration at the Kumo National Institute of Technology. Professor Park, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me today.
So a key challenge the EU administration faces is soaring food prices. What's behind the increase, and how do you think the government should address this issue?
Yeah, one of the key drivers of rising food prices in Korea under the Lee administration is the combination of global supply chain disruptions and climate-related agriculture instability and increased input costs like fuel or fertilizers. Domestically, labor shortages in rural areas and distribution inefficiencies have further amplified the problem. To address this government should implement a multi-pronged approach. The first is that invest in smart agriculture and automation to boost productivity, stabilize imports through strategic food reserves, and provide targeted subsidies or vouchers for vulnerable populations. Transparency in pricing and stronger oversight of this distribution networks can also help reduce speculative markups.
Right, and President Lee is focused on drafting an extra budget to address stagnating economic growth, which could include, the idea of giving out vouchers to be used locally. What's your take on this?
Yeah, President Lee's plan to give out local vouchers is a very typical and classical example of a policy that tries to boost demand when the economy is slow. In the short term, these vouchers can help increase household spending, especially if they are given to low and middle income, whose groups are usually spend more of what they receive. This could give a quick boost to local shops and service businesses and possibly help the wider local economy. However, this kind of financial support only gives short-term relief. It means it does not fix the deeper problems that are slowing down Korea's economic growth. The country is facing bigger challenges nowadays, like an aging population, slower productivity in major industries, and less private investments. So to make the policy truly effective and long-lasting, it should be a part of a bigger economic plan. That plan should integrate and include changes in regulations and support for innovation and long-term investments in important future industries like green energy or AI. In short term, so it means, in summarize, that the voucher program of a traditional, very classical policy can help in the short term, but for the economy to stay strong in the long term, broader forward-looking reforms are also necessary nowadays.
Right, and the shrinking labor market also remains a crucial challenge for the government. The number of job openings per job seeker is at its lowest level for any month of May since 1998, following the Asian financial crisis. How should the government respond to this?
Yeah, the sharp decline in the number of job openings now per job seeker signals deep structural stress in the labor market. When the ratio hits a 27-year low, especially for May, it means that May is a historically active hiring season. It reflects not only slowing economic activity, but also a serious mismatch between labor supply and demand. In the short term, the government should consider direct employment support, such as wage subsidies for SMEs or public sector job programs, and targeted youth employment initiatives to prevent long-term unemployment, especially among vulnerable groups. And also reskilling and upskilling programs are also very critical to help workers transition into sectors with labor shortages such as digital, green, or care economic fields. So in parallel, the government must work with industries to identify structural bottlenecks such as labor regulations, like mobility between sectors or regional imbalances, and also implement reforms to make the job market more dynamic and inclusive.
All right, and another important economic task for the government is reaching a tariff deal with the U.S. before the July deadline. And this is an issue that matters to many industries, including the auto sector. Do you believe the government is on the right track?
Yes, securing a tariff agreement with the U.S. before the July deadline is a critical economic priority, particularly for export-reliant sectors such as automobiles, semiconductors, and batteries. A failure to reach a timely deal could expose Korea firms to higher trade barriers or regulatory uncertainties, weakening their competitiveness in one of their largest markets. Based on the current diplomatic posture and trade conciliations underway, the government appears to be taking proactive steps, engaging in bilateral dialogue, aligning trade firms with broader strategic interests, and seeking exemptions or adjustments that protect key national industries. However, the challenges lies in balancing short-term industrial relief with long-term trade stability and compliance with the evolving U.S. trade policies, especially under shifting political dynamics. So to stay on the right track, Korea must ensure that any agreement not only preserves market access, but also supports supply chain resilience and investment flows between two countries.
What would you say is the most notable difference between President Lee's economic policy and that of former President Yoon?
To understand the most notable differences between the economic policies of President Lee and former President Yoon Suk-yeol, it is important to compare their perspectives in their respective approaches to the role of government, redistribution, and growth strategy. President Lee emphasized a more active role of the government in the economy. His administration promotes inclusive and sustainable growth through expanded fiscal spending and public investment in future-oriented sectors such as green energy and care services. In contrast, former President Yoon adhered to a market-oriented economic framework. It means his administration prioritized private sector-led growth, regulatory reform, fiscal discipline, and also tax incentives to encourage investment and entrepreneurship. These views position the government more as a facilitator rather than a central driver of economic transformation, focusing on structural reforms and supply side efficiency. So the key distinction lies in how each administration perceives the role of the states in economic development. These philosophical differences have shaped their respective fiscal, industrial, and labor policies and reflects divergent paths for Korean economic directions.
All right, Professor Park, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
South Korea logged a current account surplus of $5.7 billion in April, marking the 24th straight month in the black. According to the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, stronger IT exports, including semiconductors, and a drop in energy import costs helped lift the balance. The surplus, however, narrowed from the previous month when it reached over $9 billion. While the goods balance edged up, the services account saw a wider deficit amid a spike in overseas R&D payments by Korean firms. From January through April, the cumulative surplus came to nearly $25 billion, up almost $7 billion from the same period last year. President Lee held his first phone call with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba since taking office. According to the presidential office, the two leaders agreed to work together toward building a strong and stable relationship between Korea and Japan. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
Agreeing on continued cooperation bilaterally and trilaterally with the United States, the leaders of South Korea and Japan held their first phone call since the Lee Jae-myung administration took office last week. According to Seoul's top office, President Lee Jae-myung and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba spoke on the phone for around 25 minutes on Monday, marking Lee's second phone call with a foreign leader following his conversation with US President Donald Trump. Given the importance of Korea-Japan relations amid the current strategic environment, the leaders agreed on the need to build a strong and mature bilateral relationship based on a responsible approach. He conveyed his hope that the two neighbours will seek ways to cooperate on future challenges in a mutually beneficial manner, grounded in their respective national interests. The two leaders further agreed to strengthen efforts to respond to various geopolitical challenges through the framework of trilateral cooperation with the United States. When asked by reporters whether historical issues related to Japan's colonization of Korea and its wartime atrocities were raised during the conversation, a presidential official said the leaders' dialogue remained within the bounds of customary diplomatic protocol. Throughout his campaign and since taking office, the president has consistently emphasized a two-track strategy of addressing historical issues based on principles while promoting practical cooperation in economic and security matters. The Japanese PM's office noted that Ishiba expressed his intent to work closely together in responding to North Korea, including the issue of Pyongyang's abductions of Japanese citizens. In light of the 60th anniversary of the normalization of diplomatic relations between the two countries, the two leaders also discussed the importance of enhancing communication between their governments and promoting active people-to-people exchanges. The two leaders plan to meet in person in the future for in-depth discussions on bilateral ties and other issues of mutual interest. Observers believe the face-to-face occasion could come as early as this weekend on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Canada. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
In Los Angeles, over 50 people have been arrested as the protests enter their fourth day. Police have banned gatherings in downtown LA, and the Marines have been sent to support the National Guard. Our Choi Soo-young reports.
Los Angeles faces the fourth day of protests against the Trump administration's immigration raids. At least 56 people have been arrested during the protests, according to NBC News. Protesters shut down major highways, throwing concrete and Molotov cocktails. Cars were burned to ashes, and police responded with tear gas and flashbangs, filling the streets with smoke. The Los Angeles Police Department declared the entire downtown area a no-protest zone on Sunday local time, concerned about the growing violence of the protesters. On Monday, the Pentagon deployed about 700 Marines to LA to support the National Guard. Around 2,000 National Guard troops had already been sent by U.S. President Donald Trump to control the situation without the governor of California's request.
Thank goodness we sent out some wonderful National Guard. They've really helped in a lot of problems they were having out there. They were afraid to do anything, and we sent out the troops, and they've done a fantastic job.
In response, California's Governor Gavin Newsom said he will file a lawsuit against Trump over the activation of the state's National Guard. President Trump called Governor Newsom incompetent and supported arresting him after Tom Herman, the official in charge of border issues, warned that Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass could face arrest for interfering with immigration enforcement.
Look at the job he's doing in California. He's destroying one of our great states. And if I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order.
Meanwhile, the protests that began in LA are now popping up in other major cities, including San Francisco and Chicago. In San Francisco, around 60 people were arrested during Sunday's demonstration. The protest was sparked when Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers and the FBI raided downtown shops in LA last Friday, detaining around 44 people. Cho Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Direct trains between Moscow and Pyongyang, which were suspended during the COVID-19 pandemic, will resume service next week. That's according to the Russian railways on Monday, which said it will resume the international direct railway between the two cities starting June 17th, in agreement with the North Korean railway authorities. The Moscow-Pyongyang railway operates twice a month, departing from Pyongyang on the 3rd and 17th, and arriving in Moscow 8 days later. The train from Moscow to Pyongyang also takes 8 days and departs on the 12th and 26th of each month. According to Russian railways, it's the longest direct railway line in the world, covering over 10,000 kilometers.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Israeli naval forces have intercepted a yacht carrying climate activist Greta Thunberg and 11 others while it was attempting to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. The Israeli Navy boarded the British-flagged yacht Madeleine, operated by the pro-Palestinian Freedom Flotilla Coalition, detaining Thunberg and a French lawmaker among those who were on board. On early Monday, the vessel was seized approximately 185 kilometers from Gaza in international waters and escorted into a port in Israel by the evening. Israeli officials confirmed the activists were unharmed and will be deported after undergoing medical checks. They said that the yacht's cargo of symbolic aid such as baby formula, rice, and medical kits will enter Gaza through official Israeli aid channels. While Thunberg denounced the interception as kidnapping, Israel dismissed the mission as a media stunt and called the aid boat a selfie yacht. Governments in Sweden, France, and Spain have lodged consular requests, and France's President Macron has demanded swift repatriation. The boat departed from Italy on June 1st to raise awareness of the conditions in Gaza. Ukraine and Russia began the first stage of a multi-phase prisoner exchange, repatriating servicemen under the age of 25 following a humanitarian agreement reached during peace talks. On Monday, the first phase of a prisoner swap agreed on in Istanbul on June 2nd took place, involving young military prisoners and severely wounded individuals. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the exchange in his evening address, emphasizing a phased approach over several days and thanking all parties involved. Although specific numbers were undisclosed, both nations affirmed an equal exchange of prisoners. Despite conflicting claims over the exchange between the two nations the previous day, the exchange marks hope for broader negotiations aimed at exchanging at least 1,200 prisoners from each side and repatriating fallen soldiers. Apple unveiled its liquid glass design and advanced AI upgrades in iOS 26, its first major visual overhaul since iOS 7, during its Worldwide Developers Conference on Monday. The liquid glass interface introduces translucent, reflective UI elements across all platforms, including iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, and TV. AI enhancements powered by Apple Intelligence include live translation in messages, FaceTime, and the phone app, all of which are processed on device. The public beta of iOS 26, including liquid glass and AI features, launches this summer with the full release slated for this fall. Labubu dolls, a toothy plush toy from Chinese maker Pop Mart, have seen a surge in popularity and price worldwide. Created by Hong Kong artist Ka-Sing Leung and marketed since 2019, Labubu shot to fame after being spotted with celebrities like Rihanna, Dua Lipa, and Blackpink's Lisa. Collectors, mostly adults, are drawn by the blind box format of the collectibles, which offers randomly packed variants, some rare versions, fueling a global frenzy. Official retail prices range from about $20 to $30, but resale values have exploded from $100 to $7,000 for rare editions.
Summer is certainly starting strong and the heat is already quite intense. The capital area could see some spotty rain, which could bring down the highs from yesterday's sweltering heat. But the heat will persist in the southern regions, with many parts climbing above 30 degrees Celsius again. Meanwhile, parts of Jeju Island could see 5 to 20 millimeters of showers through this morning. But the UV index is expected to be very high in most areas, except in the capital area, where there will be sprinkles of rain in the morning. Meanwhile, Gwangju will be getting up to 29 degrees with the highest level of UV rays this afternoon, so sun protection is a must there. Also, those in Daegu and Gyeongju will need to stay safe in the intense heat at a high of 33 degrees Celsius. Now, the latter half of the week will see some more cloudy days, and Saturday is looking like it's going to be rainy nationwide. But the warm weather will continue for the time being, so please remember to take good care of your health.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.